Are you struggling to get out of your rank? Have you been trying to improve but just don't know where to start? Or maybe you just want to improve your gameplay? Well, today I have got an exciting new guide for y'all. I present to you Scythe's Ultimate Overwatch Guide. Welcome back, folks. Today I've gathered a great list of some of the best concepts in Overwatch to help you quickly improve. Whether you're just starting your Overwatch career or you've been playing for years, this guide should have something for you. We'll start off with some basic tips and get more advanced as we go. So without further ado, let's get going. Our first tip today is pinging. You should be using ping. If you don't, then you aren't doing everything that you can to help your team win. That's how you should think about these tips. If you really want to win the game, then you should be doing every possible thing you can do to help your team. Even if you are using voice comms and are in constant communication with your teammates, pings are still incredibly valuable. Imagine with me for a second, your team is in an intense fight, with everybody constantly doing something. You shout over comms, "Hog low." Now imagine somebody shouted that to you. You have two options. A, spin around in circles, try to find the hog that could be anywhere. Or B, ignore him and carry on as you were. Now imagine they shouted "hog low" and pinged him at the same time. Now all of your teammates have a red dot on their screen showing them exactly where he is. This can help your team do the next tip, focus fire. If you haven't heard this term, be ready to hear it a lot as you move up in the ranks. Your teammates will shout things like "focus tank" or "focus Moira." This means that your team wants everyone to look at that hero and all shoot them together. Same thing with the low health ping. They shouldn't have to say anything for you to get that they want you to focus the low hero that they pinged. Focus fire is important in fights because you want the fights to be uneven. A fair fight isn't a good fight to take in Overwatch. You want to have an advantage in every fight if possible. Tank v tank is ultimately going to come down to who the better tank is, but you want it to be about who the better team is. So help your team focus because, as all of us longtime players know, the worst team fights are the ones where everyone is just shooting around randomly and not prioritizing anybody. That's when it becomes deathmatch, not competitive. For tip number 3, we have one that I don't see mentioned very often, and that is get in and get out. This mostly only applies to flankers and divers. So let's use ball for an example. If you would swing into the enemy's backline, you are incredibly vulnerable. If you stay there for long, then the other team will eventually take you out. Yes, he's got a lot of health, but it will happen eventually. This is why it's important to get in and get out. With Ball and Doom especially, the way you want to play is jump into the enemy team, do some damage, knock them around, and then get out with about a quarter to half of your health left. I see way too many Dooms jump in and spend the rest of their life, literally, in the enemy team. They don't look at their health bar. They ignore supports telling them to get out, and they just generally throw the game with their stubbornness. I personally feel like it comes from tank ego, but that's just me. Especially when someone mains Doom or Ball and never looks to improve. They just play the way that they play and expect everybody else to pick up their slack because they're obviously not the problem. This next one is also a pretty simple concept. It's just simply to save your cooldowns. If you're just starting out, you'll find that it's difficult to get the balance right and know when to use your cooldowns. For example, Kiriko has a 15-second cooldown on Protection Suzu. That is 3 seconds longer than Ana's anti-nade, which means that if you throw Suzu every single time somebody gets antied, Ana has an opening of about 2 to 3 seconds or longer where she can anti your whole team and maybe even secure kills with her team, putting your team at a major disadvantage. This is why it's important to practice and play more to start being able to gauge whether Suzu is really necessary or not. One example is if your tank gets antied, but he backs behind cover and takes a 1v1 with one of their squishies. He doesn't need a Suzu in that moment, as long as he's got enough health, of course. and using it on an almost full health tank who's behind cover could be a total waste. This one is also pretty basic, but ends up getting overlooked quite a bit. Even by me, I admit. That is to watch your deathcams. I know I for one have a habit of spamming spacebar and being upset every time I die. But we need to look at this as an opportunity. Deathcams can reveal a lot of things, such as your enemy's cooldowns, your enemy's ult charge, even your enemy's positions sometimes. Especially if they have a Zarya or a Sojourn that kills you, you need to be checking their charge level in Deathcam. So, to myself and everyone else watching this, let's start seeing deaths as an opportunity for more info and to reset mentally, not as a bad thing. Another basic but often overlooked one. At halftime, or if you die, or maybe on the way to another point, check your scoreboard. Just do it periodically. Look at your teammates' ults, look at your stats, compare them to the enemy's stats. If your healing is much lower than their support, or if your damage is much lower than their DPS, depending on your role, make a change. Use that info to decide what you need to do. Maybe their team is getting a ton of damage and you're running something like Ana. The scoreboard can show you where your team is lacking and how you can help. It can also help you gauge if the other team has ults. It will take experience to learn where each character gets their ult, but for basics, if your team has a Ryan that has 3k damage, let's say, and they have a Ryan that has 3.5k damage, if your Ryan has his ult, or is close to it, there's a pretty good chance that their Ryan has his as well. Tip number 7. Not enough people make mention of the real formation that your team should have. There's a simple way that the team should be set up in order to minimize easy deaths and maximize easy kills. You want to have the tank in front. Now, with all of these there are going to be caveats, of course. Like if your tank is Doomfist, he pretty much plays on his own, so you shouldn't expect him to always be in the front. But for standard comps like Ryan, Rissa, Hog, Sig, what have you, you want to have your tank be your front line. As a tank, you shouldn't be in the enemy team's backline the entire game. Conversely, if you are going to stand in front of your team, you should be mindful when stepping away to go after a kill or to get cover. Many Ryans make the mistake of overextending or even backing up too far without ever communicating that to their teammates. This usually ends in multiple teammates going down because they thought they had a shield. Behind the tank should be the DPS. Once again, there is a caveat. If either of the DPS are flankers, or if they're flyers of course, they will obviously be on their own. But still be mindful that there is a space between both teams that you don't want to be in. I call this the danger zone. It's kind of like a big line in between the teams. Even if you are a flanker, if you step into this zone, you better have something to get out fast, like Wraith or Burrow. You will be the center of attention for the other team in the danger zone. Behind the DPS should be the supports. The only real caveat with this is that supports have to adapt to their team's playstyle. If your team is all flyers, then everything I said pretty much goes out the window. Brigs will also generally play further up in their team and almost act like a pseudo tank. You just really need to be good at staying alive if you're going to do that. The big takeaway is that if you are running a completely standard comp like Ryan, Soldier, Soj, Bap, Ana, then you should be in formation. That will give you the best chances. Tank in front, DPS behind him, supports behind them. This gives your supports a good line of sight on everyone. It gives your DPS cover from the other team in the form of a tank, and helps your tank have backup without risking their life. The next tip is a bit more of an advanced concept in Overwatch, but it is easy to grasp. It's called the rule of L's. I remember first hearing about this in a YouTube video years ago, but I haven't seen it mentioned very often since. I also can't remember which video. Basically, every corner in the game can be represented by an L. There is a short side and a long side of every corner. Where you want to be is on the short side. This way you are able to fire at the enemy and return to cover while the enemy is caught out in the wide open long stretch of the L. As much as this is an important concept to offense, it is just as important in defense. If you notice that their team is stacked on the small side of the corner, peeking it and taking shots at your team, you need to get out of the L as fast as possible, or find another L and return to the short side. You never want to be in the long open corridor. King's Row is a perfect example of how teams can go from being on the short side in an advantageous spot to being on the long side severely disadvantaged position-wise. This next tip is also a simple concept, but one that not many lower ranks utilize. This is the concept of push-pull. I briefly spoke about this in my Alari guide. Links in the top right corner if you, whichever one that is. But that was mainly about the pylon. The whole team should be using push-pull to their advantage. What this means is that when your team has an advantage, this would be if your team has ults, or if their team has burned some of their cooldowns or ults, then you need to push. The whole team needs to get in and be aggressive while you have the advantage. If things turn around and the other team gains the advantage, you need to be able to recognize this and pull back. Ideally, the whole team will pull back if you tell them to, or maybe if they notice, but keeping yourself alive is at the top of the objectives. At that point, you just have to trust that your teammates will stay alive as well. The 10th and final tip I have for y'all today is one that I myself need to listen to, and that is pay attention to yourself, not everyone else. This isn't to say that as a support you should ignore the rest of the team and just do damage. What I'm saying is that you need to try and get as much value as you can yourself and not just complain that the rest of the team isn't performing well. Everyone has bad games here and there, I get it. It's very frustrating, but if you spend the whole game thinking, what the hell is this Junkrat doing? Why is he over there? Why did he just die without his team? Blah blah blah. You'll soon realize that the game is over and you barely were paying attention. Even if you got a lot of value, you always leave something on the table when you get distracted by other people's performance. And I make this mistake a lot. In conclusion, there are many ways to improve in Overwatch. These were just a few of the ways that you can improve your overall performance and become a more valuable asset to your team. Let me know down in the comments any good tips and tricks you'd like to share. Who knows, maybe I'll make another one of these if I get enough tips in the comments. I also ask that if you liked this video, that you please give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more of this content. It doesn't cost a thing and it really helps my videos. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you learned something, or at least that you enjoyed it. Stay safe, good luck on your games, and I will see you again in 2 weeks. Peace.